For those of you who don't know, for some fucking reason, like I really don't know how you can't not know at this point, y'all are like for real. Anyway, in Charlottesville, you had a bunch of Nazis with their tiki torches because we all know white people are susceptible to mosquito bites. Hopefully all these fucks get malaria and die. But anyways, they had a rally to argue against the removal of Confederate statues, which, funny enough, were placed during the early 1900s, which was the rise of the KKK originally, and during the Civil Rights Movement. So really, it's about racism and hate and all that other bullshit, but I digress. So they had that rally first. We'll of course, they were met with opposition the next day with BLM showing up, Antifa showing up, all these other groups that basically say, go fuck yourselves, Nazis, because if you come out the house, we're going to beat your ass on sight, right? So so you had that happen. Then you also had, the white domestic terrorist, also a Nazi, drive a car through a crowd of Black Lives Matter protesters, killing one, rest in peace, Heather, injuring, I believe, 17, including 3 critical, and I guess a couple of cops got hurt, though to be quite honest, I don't really give a fuck about cops. So that was just some of what happened over the weekend. Following that, we had violent assaults by neo-Nazis on other protesters. So we saw that they rushed the crowd. Several people of color were assaulted. One brother had his skull was cracked open. They attacked people with pikes. They attacked people with whatever they could get their hands on, essentially. You also had literal armed militia of white people with automatic assault weapons escorting Nazis through America. American streets, an armed militia escorting Nazis. So that is what happened if you live under a rock or you're just fucking dumb. Of course, if you don't know what's going on, I assume you're the latter or you're Brandon.
I mean, so I think there is truth in that. And so far,
I think my headlines read by Adair more often. I'm just saying. Go on. That was better than anything I saw on the news. But go ahead, continue.
I mean, I was on a media blackout when this, this sort of whole thing went down. But of course, you can be on there's like a media blackout and literally living under a rock. And so once this, I always know when there's big news, when my gyms, when they're talking about what happened on the ESPN at my gym, because my gym 100% plays ESPN, on every TV all the time. And the conversation around Charlottesville was the focal point on a lot of different shows on ESPN. So I was like, okay, like this is actually big news. Like this is one of those things that actually has sort of, it's one of those political issues, quote unquote, that has infiltrated the mainstream discourse. And so I do want to point out that Heather was a member of the IWW, which is, in some ways being, industrial workers of the world, which is in some way being erased from the conversation. So, let's just, make sure we properly identify her. She was a paralegal, 32-year-old. By all counts, she was a wonderful person, organizer, etc. Rest in peace.
If you go out into a crowd of Nazis and you're out there fighting for people of color and other marginalized groups, you're a good person in my book. Like, there is no question Heather was an amazing human being, and that Nazi piece of shit that killed her deserves the worst punishment possible. Again, I think all Nazis deserve the worst possible punishment because, in the 1940s, real Americans killed Nazis.
I don't know about that.
Did we not? Did real Americans not invade Normandy and kill Nazis?
So did the communists.
Sure they did.
So did the communists. But honestly, like there's a lot to this story. So let's try to unpack it as best we can because there's so many different portions of it. So where would you guys like to start? Right? Like where do you think we should start with this one? I'll let any of you guys chime in.
I mean, we should probably start by a little bit about why there was something going on there in the first place. That it was around the monument and kind of that. We'll start with that a little bit.
White people's feelings were hurt because their participation trophies were being taken away because they're shitty fucking people. That's why the fuck they were in Charlottesville. Fuck them.
Well, yeah. So
and they wanted to kill black people.
It was the removal of a Confederate statue, which in some ways is apparently a more contentious issue than I won't know. It's about as contentious I would imagine because a new poll came out to show that the majority of Americans, or at least 67% of Americans, in some sense, think that statues of Confederate war heroes should stay up.
That's a bullshit poll. the question asked was bullshit. I mean, come on. If you had said, let's replace every Confederate statue with something to commemorate what is going on and why we shouldn't slide back into, you know, racist Jim Crow or slavery, then I think that 66% of the population would approve that as well. The way the press question was phrased was a matter of let's not forget our history. And you know, I think a lot of people would agree with that, even the normies. So, you know,
well, so, I agree with you right now, but I think that like those sorts of things.
Forgetting the history is what they want to do. Is they just want to remember the glossy parts. Go ahead, Brandon.
No, I agree with that. But like a lot of these appeals to history, a lot of these appeals to history are coded racist appeals, right? The whole Make America Great, Make America Great Again. It's appeal to like a nostalgified. The whole Trump slogan of Make America Great Again wasn't a appeal to a nostalgic version of the 1950s, the Jim Crow segregated era of United States of America, where things were somehow better because things were more, you know, were less diverse, right?
Well, one second. Let's actually take that apart. What you just said, real quick, because you said something important. You said things were somehow better, right? Things were factually better for white people in the 1950s. Just factually speaking, things were better for them.
Of course.
White supremacy was inherently codified. It was expected. It was the norm. So just by default, life was better for white people in the 50s. It wasn't better for anybody else. And we know that.
Yeah, there was
particularly in the unions as well, which is often overlooked, as the unions were heavily segregated, and even though they sometimes were fighting for black rights and so on and so forth, they were also heavily segregated, especially at the top. But continue.
Oh no, definitely there was less competition in the market because of white supremacy. So, you know, obviously it sort of fit into this notion that white people were doing better, but because of some sort of merit, because of merit. At the same time, the idea that people were doing better in the 1950s is in some ways, you know, it's nostalgia, right? It's like it's based on you know, imagined view of the past that's created from dissatisfaction with the present circumstances, and a lot of those present circumstances are economic circumstances. So like whether or not white people, like, yes, the economy was doing better, or rather had better potential than it does now in 1950s, but that's sort of been tied to to cultural elements that are not necessarily the factor for that.
Yeah, I do want to move on just a little bit. I want to talk specifically about what did happen.
Okay. That's what I meant to say. I did want to bring up the fact what John said about the poll being bullshit. Maybe the poll is bullshit, but here's why I'm inclined to actually believe the poll at least a little bit, right? I brought this before. America as a country, and this has to do with institutionalized, you know, or rather just how ubiquitous and hegemonic white supremacy actually is and how racism is. We teach the idea that quibbling over the moral complexities of racists and white supremacists in slavery and, you know, and all those sorts of things are okay. You know, like that's built into our sort of elementary education, because we learn about presidents, we learn about historical figures who have, you know, histories of native genocide, of owning slaves, of raping slaves. And those parts of their history are kind of whitewashed away, or used to paint them as morally complex as opposed to bad, right?
Let's not say kind of whitewashed away. You literally have to go outside of your school books to hear that Christopher Columbus was a genocidal rapist and just all around terrible person to begin with. B, you have to start looking at the fact that now the Civil War is being called the War of Northern Aggression by books in Texas. By the way, folks, those books will soon circulate to your children's school because Texas sets the national standard for textbooks. These are things that are happening. They don't call slaves anymore in these textbooks. They call them undocumented workers. We have liberals out there comparing literal slavery, the literal capture and removal of people by force from their homeland, taken across the sea, held as property, beaten, murdered, and raped. They call that the equivalent to immigration. Like, this is the thing that's happening. It's not kind of whitewashed. They just completely gloss the hell over it because it's too hard for collective white America to wake up, look in the mirror, realize, wow, our country has been and always will be shit so long as we continue to do this.
Well, America's a country built on
bliss, right?
No, America's a country built on racism, right, and white supremacy as a byproduct or a subset of that. And so a lot of our institutions...
That seems like something that we just agree on, but that is a point of contention right there. That America's that's the genesis of America. You'll hear much more of the peachy rosy freedom, independence, individualism, rights, rule of law. You'll hear all sorts of those types of things, but you won't hear about the white supremacy or the racism or the systematic destruction of culture, history, lives, bodies, minds, and all that. You won't hear any of that.
Well, because the story of America is told from a Eurocentric and in a lot of ways white-centric, Anglo-centric rather, viewpoint, right? It's the idea that there was no culture, or rather, that there wasn't real culture before Columbus came here. There wasn't, real people here. Like that always seems to be the subset that, for all the bad things that colonization did, it inevitably brought with it the progress. It brought with it, progress. It brought with it, real culture. It brought with it these sorts of amorphous, or rather, let's be honest, coded terms for white supremacy. That's what colonization did. So it can't be all bad. And when I say, America is a white supremacist country built on racism and all those other things, like that is still with our institutions to this day. So we talk about the fact that, yes, people in schools don't really learn a version of George Washington or Thomas Jefferson. We can't even, half the time people reference Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings, they don't even refer to it as rape. It sounds like it's his mistress.
Yeah.
Like the hard.
But I feel like we're getting a little far from what we were talking about on the show. Like I want to refocus this directly on what happened in Charlottesville. We talk a lot about white supremacy, and I think there's a lot of information.
Okay,
so if y'all don't understand white supremacy, Google some shit. You're watching a show either on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, wherever. You have access to the internet. If you're watching our show, you can Google some shit and you can learn some more. We need to talk about what happened in Charlotte. We need to talk about why they were there, right? We need to talk about what actually happened. And the fact of the matter is, we had Nazis marching through the streets of America, and we have people defending that right now.
I mean, fair enough. We can come back to the Confederate statue issue and what that stuff signifies. But yeah, let's actually take it for what it is at the moment. So we had Nazis marching in Charlottesville, North Carolina. Virginia. I'm sorry. I'm thinking of Durham right now. I'm thinking of Durham, North Carolina, with the statue.
Durham is where they did the statue for.
Yeah, that was nice. Takia Thompson. Takia Thompson, a hero, tore down the statue. You know what? We'll get to that as well.
We'll get to that
in a bit. So, I think that we're used to these kinds of marches now, these kinds of protests by now, right? We see them relatively popular. They're becoming relatively frequent. No matter what they're called, free speech rallies. I guess usually it's just free speech rally, right? Like it's a rally for freedom of speech. Alt-right rally. The Proud Boys come, to defend against the Antifa. But this is the first time I would say that the realities of white supremacy and racism, the material consequences of it, for lack of a better word, became very clear to those who were part of that movement just because they wanted to be a bunch of fucking edgelords.
Well, I mean, part of that is true, right? You have some of those people that did show up and were like, I'm going to come here and just trigger me some SJWs, and that's going to be the end of the fucking day. No, that's not what happened, right? So you had the one, and it's really funny. Unfortunately, we don't have a clip for you guys, but I'm sure you can find it, of the white kid who decided he was going to go to a Nazi rally, wear a white power T-shirt, and then when confronted by people of color, punked all the way out, undressed, ran to the corner. I was here because I wanted to check out the site. Nah, beat his ass. Period. Beat everybody's ass who shows up, but beat his ass in particular. You hear, what you just said, Brennan, being said by a lot of white folks who don't mean it in the same way that you do, right? A lot of the white folks are like, oh, they just showed up to exercise their First Amendment right. Nazis marching through the street is allowed. No, fuck that. They didn't just come to sit up here and march. They came with the express intent, to cause political violence, right? You decided to use their mere presence for intimidation to affect governmental and societal change. Pretty sure that's terrorism 101, folks. But moving beyond that, they also came and admitted on video, like old boy who cried during his little posting because he's got a warrant out for his arrest.
That was amazing. He caught a warrant.
Hold on, we'll get to that because I'm not done.
To be honest,
because they came through here. They came with the express intent to commit violent acts. They said on camera, "We will kill these people if we have to." They came armed some of them came armed, and this is the militia folks, with automatic assault rifles. Some of these people came armed with pipes, bats, shields. They came ready to actually physically attack people, and that's exactly what they did. They drove a car to a crowd of people and killed somebody.
And it's been pointed out several times, but just quickly that they weren't able to see the cars in front of them and intended on charging through very many, like much more people than they got through. Like, so it was going to be a much more heinous act than it even was. But go ahead, continue.
Like, this is for all you folks out there just being like, oh no, it's just edgy. It's not about being edgy. It's literally about violence. It's literally about political violence to affect societal change, because they really, for whatever reason, think mixed people, people of color, disabled people, LGBTQIA folks are out here a threat to the quote unquote right ways. Let me go ahead and tell y'all something real quick. Let me go ahead and tell y'all white folks. Just generally speaking, you guys are the single largest demographic, right? Which means that we break everybody down into different groups: Black, Asian, Latinx, Native, white, right? White people have the largest single group of people. But when you add everybody else up, just generally speaking, we outnumber y'all. Secondarily, if you take into account white folks who don't agree with you, we severely outnumber y'all. And then the ones who do agree with you and the ones who just like, I'm gonna sit on the sideline. No, y'all agree with them. Minority in this shit. I don't understand where y'all are coming from. Like, you're not going to affect any real change.
Well, they have a very high voter participation rate. That's one of the problems. But go on.
They do have a high voter participation rate, and that's part of the problem with the system. That's part of the problem with what's going on. That's why Nazis need to be afraid. Beat the living fuck out of them every time they step out of their house. Beat the shit out of them. Report them to their jobs. Dox them. Make their lives a living hell.
So now is the time where I'm going to hand wring about violence against Nazis real quick, and I'll say no, it's fine. This is my role. I'm going to hand wring about political violence is wrong, and we should find some other solutions to anyway. So what I was going to say actually was this. When I say that a lot of the people who go to these rallies, on the side of free speech, like, yes, do I think that they're going there to practice free speech? No, that's fucking stupid. Anyone who believes that, could you imagine being like over the age of 12 and believing that? I can't. But I don't think they're going there necessarily to create violence or to be violent per se. What I mean by that is essentially this.
You're wrong.
No.
You're factually wrong, Brandon.
Let me finish. You can contradict me when I'm done, because maybe I am wrong. But here's what I'm trying to say. Right? I think that there are definitely some neo-Nazis there who go with the hardcore neo-Nazis go there with the intent to create a violent scenario to beat up marginalized people because they're fucking scumbags. Right? But I do think that with the advent of the internet, I think Angela Nagel talks about this as well in her book, and I want to have her on soon because she has a new article on the Baffler. The internet age created a subset of Nazis, because they're still Nazis, right? Who are privileged white kids, privileged white mid-20-year-olds, privileged white fucking middle-aged people who should know better, who are disaffected and have some like grievance with society that is largely abstract from their actual material conditions. And just based on how they feel about it's not finished, and based on how they feel about where they are socially right now. And so they join these movements because they're edgelords, and they want to go and they want to trigger SJWs and they want to trigger libs and they want to do all that stuff. And because they're so privileged, they have actually been successfully able to abstract the politics in the dangerous sociality of being in sort of extreme far right Nazi groups from the material violence that shit causes and indexes. And you have these people.
Yeah, but I mean, look, you got 10 guys marching, and one of them's doing Sig Heil and screaming blood and soil, and you got 9 guys marching, still choosing to march with him and not go, oh fuck that guy, I'm out of here.
Oh, of course they're Nazis.
No,
of course they're all Nazis. Don't be.
I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying with the online movement's creating something where you've got the edgelords and you've got the irony bros and you've got this whole side of the alt-right. But the problem is that once you mobilize to the street, you're no longer actively just trolling people online. You're changing the dynamic of your argument. Now it's a matter of you've got 10 Nazis marching. Whether or not all 10 of them believe in the Nazi ideology or believe in genocide is a different matter. But at March, you got 10 Nazis marching.
But here's the thing. What's the word, right? Because you're factually wrong. You are factually wrong when we talk about this idea that a large portion, like there's not a large faction of these people. There's not even a sizable faction. Frankly, I would say that it is statistically irrelevant, right? The number of people that fall under the category in which you're speaking that attend these rallies. Because the fact of the matter is, those people that do fall under that, they are not the type to show up at an actual rally. They're not the type to show up and mobilize. So we have one person, right? That one kid who pissed himself and went and took off his shirt. We had one. The fact of the matter is, these people that show up, these are Klan members. These are neo-Nazis. These are people who are dedicated to any means necessary of removing people of color, LGBT people, and anybody else that they deem unworthy from American society. These are people who feel that violence is their necessary aim. So, like, no matter what, whether it's physical violence or in the case that you're talking about, these kids that sit there online and talk about, you know, killing all black people and gassing Jews and denying the Holocaust and saying that all Mexicans are rapists and all these other things, those are still acts of violence. Those are not. There's no real difference between being just online, because you're still inspiring people. You're still going to, when you partake in those conversations, just like people want to say, well, you need to give Ann Coulter a platform. No, the fuck I don't. Because Ann Coulter was one of the people that radicalized, let me finish, that radicalized the Charleston shooter. These people are not innocent in any way, shape, or form. The people that show up for the rally go there with the specific intent of causing harm. And it's not just a small minority that is that way. They say it loudly. They say it proudly. They talk about the violence they're going to commit. Again, they said on video, they are willing to kill people. They are willing to kill people. You need to take them at their word. The fact of the matter is, political violence against fascists is not, in my opinion, violence. It's justice. It's the only morally correct stance to have.
Well, so here's the thing, right? So, like, two things. First, check the DMs real quick, everyone, while I talk. Second, you know, I agree, right? So there is this position where there are radical sort of gaps in people's understanding of what politics are and what these spaces actually are, right? So you can say, well, hey, you know, what I say online is not violence. It's, you know, it's not real. It's, you know, it's abstract. Similarly, even more dangerously, like what I do politically, if I vote for Trump, that's not an act of violence, and it's just an abstract thing. It's just an abstract thing that you know, that has no effect on material circumstances. And I think that people feel that way, not just the alt-right, right? But there's a subset of the population that there's a subset of population that feels as though politics does not actually have material circumstances, and so therefore any political behavior is not is not indexing any kind of real world, you know, effect. Like, well, if I vote for Trump, who cares? Like, you know, it's just me expressing, you know, my freedom of speech or me expressing some sort of grievance. Right. The funny thing about these people, of course, and why they're always crying is because, like, this is the grievance. This is the grievance policies. This is the grievance policy. This is the grievance politics and the grievance movement of, like, the least aggrieved people in the entire world. Now, you know, I joke about hand-wringing about violence against Nazis, and I'll be perfectly clear, right? Like, while no one in this channel advocates proactively being violent against Nazis, no one here, regardless of how anyone else feels, is going to sit down and admonish Antifa or admonish anarchists or admonish, you know, people who are acting in radical self-defense against literal Nazi agitators, right? And so while I say, yeah, there are people who go to these people who go to these, you know, rallies, who are essentially cosplaying as Klansmen, cosplaying as Nazis, and some of these people, like with the guns, cosplaying as the military, because we know these sorts of white supremacists, they love stolen valor insofar that I believe that being in the military makes you valorous. Like, that's not me saying that they're good people. In some ways, you know, I would prefer that they were but them being actual Nazis would at least kind of make me think that, I don't know, like, I would be more amenable to it. But the fact that, you know, they're just role-playing Nazi because they feel so aggrieved, usually because they can't get a date or whatever, that they have to, you know, attack the most marginalized people is like disgusting. But we're seeing an exodus from the alt-right, from basically from every prominent alt-right media figure on Twitter and YouTube. It's like, oh, the alt-right is the alt-right is what was it, Jack Pro? So I can't pronounce his name. Like basically every alt-right media person is distancing themselves from them, including Steve Bannon.
Here's the thing, though. Here's the thing, and so you get here. I'm gonna actually address a couple of your points. One, you don't get to cosplay as a Nazi. You don't get to cosplay as a Klansman. You either are or you're not. When you show up to those rallies, when you show up to those, when you get on those websites, when you comment on those message boards, when you talk about the things that they do, you're not cosplaying. You are literally a Nazi.
I think the point more being that they have no heart. It's all more bark than bite. But continue.
But that bark is dangerous, and here's why. And it's an act of white supremacist violence, whether or not you want to call it cosplaying or not, because I really don't feel that it's possible to cosplay as one of these hate groups. You either are or you're not. But let's say for the sake of argument, right, that we'll take Brandon's point and say that they're cosplaying. It's impossible because when they start talking about these things, again, you're radicalizing real people who go out into the world and commit real acts of terror. Again, the Charleston terrorist, was radicalized first by people like Ann Coulter. And then he continued marching further and further and further and further to the right. He got onto the Daily Stormer website. He got onto all these, racist Twitter and all these other spots and continued to further his radicalization. So you cannot tell me that there's anything that they do is cosplay. It's real. It's reality. What you present yourself online online is who you are, because that anonymity gives you the freedom to be your truest self. So these people are, it may be, well, I'm aggrieved because I think I'm not getting a job because black people get, they get free jobs. When actually black people have a higher unemployment rate because we face, racism just even in the workplace so much. Even getting a interview is hard for black people if your name sounds quote unquote too black. Anyways, right? So these people are committing acts of violence to begin with, but then when you physically show up to one of these rallies, when you align yourself with people that are driving a car through a crowd, when you align yourself with people that are beating an innocent black man with pipes and anything else they can get their hands on, you are aligned with violence. Your existence, therefore, becomes an act of violence.
I do think this is a watershed moment, right? So like, if we could agree, even if we can agree to disagree that prior to Charlottesville, there was some kind of moral gray area, which I don't think that at all, but I can think of a better phrase for it, for people in the alt-right in terms of whether or not they were good or bad or just misled or just, impressionable youth, disaffected youth, whatever. After Charlottesville, there is none of that. Like, I think anyone who is still promoting that mentality is anyone who's still willing to join the alt-right after what happened in Charlottesville, anyone who's still promoting that mentality, anyone who's still promoting the frankly offensively dumb notion that Antifa and fascists are exactly the same because of whatever. I honestly, I don't know how you could even come to that position without, again, eating enough lead paint chips to kill you.
I have an explanation for that, actually.
No, let me finish. Let me just finish my thought. Post Charlottesville, if you believe that, you're either a Nazi, you're either catastrophically dumb or a Nazi appeaser, right? It's just because that's all there is. That's all there is now, right? There is no more. These are impressionable youth who don't know what they're doing. It's now okay. Well, there are now Nazis in the streets who are killing people because they don't believe that certain groups have the right to exist. And if you're willing to align yourself with them, regardless of what your own internal sense of I'm doing it because I'm confused or because I don't have any friends or whatever, no one cares anymore. Except for, of course, white supremacists who still want to quibble over the moral complexities of, white youth who apparently white men are still youth in their mid to late 30s, but that's just whatever.
Well, that's young in the Republican Party.
Yeah. It's young for viewers of mainstream media.
Right. Anyways, though, but so here's something that I've been seeing is there's not been a lot of equivocating between the alt-right, right, and the Antifa and all these, BLM and these other folks from a lot of the peak ideology folks, and for those of you who don't get that joke, that's the centrist out there, right? But I do see a lot of white people saying, well, I'm not thrilled about Antifa, I'm not thrilled about BLM, but they're definitely not fascists, right? They're not as bad as the fascists. Well, here's the thing, you should be thrilled about both, because the fact of the matter is, any organization that exists solely to fight fascism is a good organization. Like, fascism is a bad thing. Fascism wants people to die.
Whoa. Portrait and courage there, Adair. Fascism is the bad thing. You show you're ready to take such a bold stance.
Nazis are bad, folks.
We can joke about it, right? Like, we on this show, we can laugh at that. We can be like, oh, haha, that's funny, because we understand what the hell fascism is. The problem is, all these peak ideology folks, all these centrists, all these white liberals literally don't understand that it's not a difference in opinion. It's not a difference in political ideology. It's not the same thing as Republicans and Democrats having slight differences over how they're going to, maintain imperialism and all this other bullshit. It is literally groups of people out there who want the government to exterminate folks. It is terrible. It is literally calling for the death of anybody who's a person of color. They are literally acting out what they want. They are murdering people in the street. Literally every single person, and I mean that in the literal sense, not the hyperbolic sense. Every single person needs to be against fascism. Every single person needs to be a member of Antifa, because that is kind of our fucking job. That's literally kind of our job. That's something that is that Americans claim to hold dear, is this idea that we're against fascists, we're against imperialism, we're against killing people because they belong to a marginalized group. Are y'all? Where the fuck y'all are sitting over here flipping over?
There was polls going around before the election about whether, and I think shortly after, about whether basically to suspend the First Amendment with regard to whether people could practice the religion of Islam or practice the religion of Islam, and that got majority of Republican support, and especially scored well among Trump supporters. That we don't need a First Amendment if it's talking about Islam. And so, like, the idea that these people don't support fascism or aren't fascists, I mean, we have data to back up that given the opportunity, they would quickly and certainly apply it. And so
they would apply it selectively, right? But what they don't realize, and so here's the thing,
fascism has always been applied selectively in the United States of America. It's
just like, that's the thing, but that's what we're talking about, right? That's what we're talking about with this, is they want these kind of things to continue. Liberals, for example, they're not against fascism. Like, especially all you white liberals out there who quibble about, I don't really like Black Lives Matter because I don't really agree with their tactics. Like, you guys just want equal opportunity imperialism across gender lines. You don't actually give a shit about liberation for anybody that's not white. And so that's part of the problem that we're running into. And that's what we're seeing with a lot of these folks who are saying, well, there's not much difference between the two. There's a vast amount of difference between the two. Like, literally, my want for everybody to have, access to healthcare, income, housing, food security, education to whatever level they want to go is not equivalent to them wanting to kill me just because I'm Black. Like, there's no equivalence there at all.
I would say that they do care about across race lines to a degree, as far as presenting.
They want a lot.
How many pussy hats have you seen at a Black Lives Matter?
They want a lot of Black board members. They want at least.
How many pussy hats do you see at a Black Lives Matter?
They just want Black board members to say exactly what the white board members would say. But go ahead.
I don't follow that kind of stuff. But what I was going to say is this: like, just to clarify my early statements about like this being a watershed moment for the alt-right. And at these rallies, you would definitely hear people say like, chant racist slogans like, "Oh, you will not replace us," and all other stuff that is obviously rooted in deep neo-Nazi ideology and rhetoric.
It's rooted in actual Nazi ideology.
Yeah,
Like the Nazis literally said, Jews will not replace us. That's the original phrase. Jews will not replace us.
And people that they were shouting, Jews will not replace us, they were also shouting blood and soil, which was a Nazi slogan.
That was the Nazi Department of Agriculture. That was their literal slogan.
And people are hailing, and like I think even Trump said like like, at least reference "you will not replace us" with the statue thing. But like ultimately, like I think that a lot of that was, well, I guess my point was like a lot of that was based around a social component of this whole thing. Like it was just people parroting language. And I think now after Charlottesville, it's going to have a very big, cognitive component. Like, hey, what does it actually mean to be the alt-right? And what does, and now I think a lot of people are seeing consequences. But as for, we can go about the consequences a little bit later. People are losing their jobs. People are being disowned.
Well, there are people losing their jobs. Like there's no real.
Of course.
There's no real jumping of ship. People are still like
there was also Dylan Roof not very long before this, but go ahead, Adair. I know you're
right. No, I agree with you, Richard. You're right. Like Richard, Dylan Roof, the Charleston terrorist. That should have been a watershed moment for a lot of these folks. But guess what? They stuck around. Guess what? They stuck around through this entire time. Like we're not seeing this massive jumping of ship. You have Steve Bannon, who gave a mild rebuke of the alt-right. But you literally have Donald Trump saying there's good people on both sides. He literally praised Nazis. Actual Nazis received praise from the president of the United States. Like this, for them, is the best recruitment tool that they have had in a very long time. And to compound on that, again, going back to a lot of our audience, because I know quite a few of you are white and on the left, this whole idea of you have to fight hate with love thing, it doesn't solve anything.